let's see. So discovery coincides with what he would call this idea of like elusiveness, and that's the ALL, elusive with an A.
Yeah, which is really, I think, what the next, I mean, that's sort of where that section ends. Poetic thinking is contextualized by poetic influences, which I think is probably like a good way to sum up what we were just trying to parse out. Like, the things that you think about when you're thinking about writing a poem are comprised very much, very, very specifically, I would say, of other poets you have read.
Yeah, and when he's talking about elusiveness on page 13, I'm saying at issue is how to determine the appropriateness of an illusion. And since great poetry is very nearly as elusive as it is figurative, the question of accuracy in tracing elusiveness is crucial. So, I was like, elusiveness, so we discovered elusiveness is just references, so kind of like these outside references are what Bloom would call influences in
Of course,
writing.
yeah.
And then the thing I would push back on is it required? Is that required of poet? Like, and he's
Well,
saying
I
that's
think it
required
happens
of.
whether you want it to or not. If you read poetry, which hopefully you do if you write it, no offense if you don't, but like
No,
kind
take
of.
offense if you don't. If you write it and you don't read it, you shouldn't be writing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we agree with that, I think that's kind of true, right? Like, I can't think of a single poem I wrote that wasn't, you know, somehow coming from a place of inspiration from another poet. It's why often before you start writing, you decide to read a few pages of poetry, or why I do. I think also the interesting suggestion here is that you should be an avid reader of poetry and not just like contemporary poetry, but poetry, or, not just poetry from one specific time, but poetry through history.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that. So let's try to answer the question if he's gonna make this argument that elusiveness and the appropriateness of the illusion is a huge factor in determining what's great or not. How does one determine appropriateness of an illusion? And
Well,
does he give us an answer? Or what are your thoughts versus his, etc., etc.?
the appropriateness of
It's a
illusion
weird phrase, right? I think he's
is
talking
a
about taste,
difficult.
right? He's talking about like taste or how
um
egregious copying. I mean, I don't know. Like, I guess it helps me to think of it as like
what
he's talking
page
about.
does he say that on? Just
Sorry.
tell me where to go. I don't have it written
Page
down.
13 is where the quote I put when he's talking about the accuracy and tracing elusiveness. And, I mean, that was just a note I wrote to myself. So, for his definition of great poetry is poetry that combines elusiveness, figurative language, these all the aspects of figurative language that come with it. Uh, and I think that is his obsession with this kind of influence coming in. But is that coming in too far? Uh, and if influence slash illusion, direct illusion, is so important, why is it so important? Does it tell us much more about the meaning of the words on the page or
Well, I
whatever
think
the.
that's the thing it depends on, right? And that's, I guess, what appropriate illusion is. Does it aid in building meaning in a poem?
Right, so that's a craft element, and then
Or is it just there?
I think it's also like a reference to taste, something even more harder to define. I mean, so maybe that's doing a lot of work. Maybe we're just reading into it too much. But I think he does kind of explain that a little bit on page 15, second paragraph, or start of the first full paragraph on page 15, where he says, recognizing and interpreting illusions depends upon both the reader's learning and her tact.
Right. So I think that's really just talking about accuracy there, right? And it's sort of kindly saying, you have to be, you have to sort of school yourself in the subject before you're able to accurately tackle a lot of elusiveness
It's funny to me
or
that
even pick
people
up on it.
it's funny to me that people get upset about somebody saying something like that. That like yeah, so he's like recognizing and interpreting illusions depends on the
No
reader.
one should
So
get upset at that because,
well, like
like, look,
the
I don't fucking know what I'm reading at least 50% of the time, if not more, probably more. Like, and I have to go look up everything, every like phrase or word to find something that it might be referring to.
well that too. So it's like it's a less pleasurable experience if you're not as seasoned. But yeah, this idea of like a less seasoned reader, I like that phrasing. Like is going to have a different experience reading The Wasteland than somebody like Bloom in his 70s who's read everything under the sun in multiple languages. Like this guy
Well,
could
isn't
read.
this why people think poetry is too difficult? Because all of its figuration and elusiveness.
Oh shit! Now we're gonna get into it, dude. This I
People,
guess we'll have to have.
isn't that why people shy away from it other
Yeah,
than just straight up not liking it? Like,
I don't know, dude. I guess we're gonna have to have Ben Lerner on to explain, dude. He's gonna tell us why people
why do
hate it.
people hate poetry so
We,
much?